press conference hall buzzed with tension as camera flashes lit up Jack Thompson's face. Despite his tailored suit and practiced smile, sweat beaded at his temples. The room was packed with journalists, their laptops open and phones recording, all waiting to tear into him. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. Mr. Thompson, how do you respond to allegations of market manipulation? A reporter from the Daily Chronicle stood up, microphone thrust forward. Jack gripped the podium, his knuckles whitening. These allegations are baseless. Thompson Media Group has always operated within legal parameters. Another reporter jumped in before he could continue. Sources claim you've been artificially inflating viewer numbers. Care to comment? The questions kept coming, each one more pointed than the last. Jack maintained his composure, but his usual charm was cracking. His PR team watched from the sidelines, wincing at each accusation. After 15 grueling minutes, his communications director called for a final question. Later that afternoon, Jack sought refuge in a small cafe downtown, far from the corporate towers where he usually conducted business. The place was nearly empty, with mismatched furniture and the smell of coffee beans in the air. As he slumped into a corner booth, a woman in a grey cleaning uniform wiped down nearby tables. She worked methodically, seemingly unaware of who he was. Jack watched her, noting how she paid attention to details others might miss. When she reached his table, she simply nodded and continued her work, treating him like any other customer. "You don't watch much news, do you?" he asked, curious about her lack of recognition. "Can't afford cable," she replied, continuing to clean. "I'm Sophia. Would you like me to come back later?" Her straightforward response caught him off guard. No pretense, no agenda, just honest work and direct communication. Jack sat up straighter, an idea forming. "Actually, I'd like to offer you a job," he said. "A different kind of cleaning, helping me clean up my public image." Sophia paused, cloth in hand. "I'm just a cleaning lady, Mr. Thompson, Jack Thompson, and that's exactly why I need you. The public sees me as an out-of-touch billionaire, but if I were married to someone like you, hard-working, honest, from a different social circle, it could change everything." Sophia's hand tightened on the cleaning cloth. "Are you suggesting a fake marriage? I prefer marriage of convenience. You'd be well compensated, enough to live comfortably for years." She looked around the cafe, taking in the worn furniture and tired faces of the other workers. Her uniform had a small tear in the sleeve, carefully mended but still visible. "Why me?" she asked, finally meeting his eyes. "Because you're authentic, something I'm apparently not, according to the press." Jack pulled out his business card. "Think about it. Call me within 24 hours if you're interested." Sophia took the card, studying it carefully. "And if I say yes, then we start planning the greatest story the media has ever seen." Jack stood up, leaving a $100 bill on the table. "Consider it a down payment on our future partnership." As he walked out, Sophia watched him leave, the business card heavy in her pocket. Later that night, in her small apartment, she stared at her bank statement, showing an overdrawn account and mounting bills. Her real press credentials were hidden in a locked drawer, along with notes about Thompson Media Group's suspicious activities. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. Jack answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of her decision. "But I have conditions." Sophia moved silently through the dimly lit office after hours, her cleaning cart providing the perfect cover. Her press training made her methodical, photographed documents without disturbing their placement, access computer files while leaving no digital footprint. The security guards barely glanced at her, used to the cleaning staff's presence. In Jack's executive suite, she discovered a hidden safe behind a painting of New York's skyline. It took 3 nights of observation to learn the combination from the reflection in his window. Inside, she found folders labeled Operation Kingmaker, containing photographs of politicians in compromising positions, along with detailed financial records. Political leverage, she whispered, snapping pictures with a miniature camera disguised as a cleaning spray bottle. The documents revealed a pattern. Politicians who opposed Thompson Media Group's interests suddenly changed their votes after private meetings with Jack's executives. Meanwhile, during daylight hours, their relationship training proceeded. Jack hired an image consultant who orchestrated their public appearances down to the smallest detail. No, Jack sighed during one practice session. You can't eat the salad with that fork. It's the smaller one. Sophia deliberately fumbled with the cutlery. In my world, we're lucky if we get matching silverware at all. They practiced everything. How to walk together, how to tell their how we met story, even how to argue convincingly in public. Jack taught her about wine selections and charity galas, while Sophia showed him how to appear more relatable by teaching him to fix a leaky faucet. Your hands are too soft, she commented, watching him struggle with a wrench. People will never believe you've worked a day in your life. That's why I have you, he replied, but his smile seemed genuine rather than calculated. The real test came at the annual Media Excellence Awards. Victoria Chen, Jack's ex-girlfriend and head of a rival network, spotted them immediately. She glided across the room in a designer dress that probably cost more than Sophia's yearly salary. Jack, darling, Victoria purred, air-kissing his cheek while completely ignoring Sophia. I see you've been slumming it. Sophia felt Jack tense beside her. She squeezed his hand, playing her role perfectly. Actually, I was just telling Jack about my community outreach program ideas for Thompson Media. What's your network doing for underprivileged communities, Ms. Chen? Victoria's perfectly painted smile faltered. Charity is so pedestrian. We prefer to focus on excellence. Interesting choice of words, Sophia replied, maintaining eye contact. I've always found that true excellence includes lifting others up, not looking down on them. The tension crackled between them. Jack watched the exchange with growing interest, noticing how Sophia held her ground without resorting to Victoria's tactics. Well, Victoria said, her voice sharp as glass, I suppose everyone needs a hobby, even if it's playing dress-up with the help. She sashayed away, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and implied threat. Jack turned to Sophia, impressed by her composure. You handled that well, he said quietly. Sophia shrugged, but her heart was racing. Not from Victoria's insults, but from what she'd overheard earlier. Victoria's name had appeared in those confidential documents, connected to the political leverage scheme. Your ex-girlfriend, Sophia said carefully. She seems invested in your life. Victoria doesn't like losing control, Jack replied, his expression darkening. And she considers me something she lost. Sophia made a mental note to investigate Victoria's connections more thoroughly. The woman's hostility seemed to go beyond simple jealousy. There was something calculated about it, something that tied into the larger web of manipulation she was uncovering. As they posed for photographers, Sophia felt Jack's hand on her lower back, steady and warm. She tried to ignore how natural it felt, how her body instinctively leaned into his touch. This was supposed to be an investigation, not a romance. But as she caught their reflection in a nearby mirror, his tall frame protectively angled toward her, her face tilted up to his, she realized the lines were already beginning to blur. The charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum buzzed with Manhattan's elite. Sophia, dressed in a borrowed Valentino gown, circulated through the crowd with practiced ease. 3 weeks of etiquette training with Jack had taught her how to blend in, but her investigative instincts remained sharp. She spotted her target, Senator Williams, mentioned prominently in the Operation Kingmaker files. He stood near a Greek statue, deep in conversation with one of Jack's board members. Sophia positioned herself within earshot, pretending to admire a nearby painting. The vote has to be delayed, the senator whispered. Thompson's people have something on Martinez. Use it. Sophia's fingers itched for her recorder, but she couldn't risk being caught. Instead, she memorized every detail, noting how the senator's hands shook as he accepted a drink. Lost in thought, Jack's voice startled her. He appeared beside her, 2 champagne glasses in hand. "Just admiring the art," she replied, accepting a glass. Her heart raced, but not from fear of discovery. Jack looked particularly handsome in his tuxedo, and the genuine warmth in his eyes when he looked at her was becoming harder to ignore. They drifted toward a quieter corner of the museum, away from prying eyes. The soft lighting and classical music created an intimate atmosphere that had nothing to do with their arrangement. "You know," Jack said quietly, "I never expected this to feel so real," Sophia finished, then immediately regretted it. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. "I've spent my whole life wearing masks," he continued, surprising her with his candor. "The ruthless businessman, the media mogul, the society playboy. But with you," he trailed off, studying her face. "What mask am I wearing, Jack?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "That's just it. I don't think you're wearing one at all." The irony of his words hit her like a physical blow. Here she was, investigating him, lying about her identity, while he praised her authenticity. The guilt was overwhelming. Their moment was shattered by Victoria's arrival. She wore red, dramatic as blood, against the museum's white walls. "How domestic," she sneered, eyeing their proximity. "Jack, the board members are asking for you. Something about sensitive information." Jack tensed. Sophia recognized the subtle threat in Victoria's words. She knew about the documents too. "I should go," Jack said reluctantly. "Will you be all right?" Sophia nodded, watching him leave. As soon as he was out of earshot, Victoria's facade dropped. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed, playing the simple cleaning woman who captured the billionaire's heart. "I don't play games, Ms. Chen. That seems to be your specialty." Victoria laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, but you do. The question is, does Jack know what game you're really playing?" Sophia's blood ran cold. Did Victoria know her true identity? "I've had Jack investigated," Victoria continued. "Every employee, every connection, and you, my dear, don't quite add up. Are you threatening me? Consider it a warning. Jack's world isn't for people like you. When he discovers who you really are." Victoria smiled, poison sweet. "Well, let's just say, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." She glided away, leaving Sophia shaken. From across the room, she caught Jack's eye. He was surrounded by board members, but looking only at her, concern evident on his face. Sophia touched the small recorder hidden in her clutch. The evidence she gathered could destroy Jack's empire, and possibly Jack himself. But for the first time since starting this investigation, that thought brought her no satisfaction. Because Victoria was right about one thing. When the truth came out, everything would shatter. And Sophia was no longer sure she could bear being the one holding the hammer. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Thompson media executive arrested in corruption probe, screamed the headlines across every major network. James Porter, Jack's chief financial officer, was led out of his office in handcuffs, while reporters swarmed the building like hungry sharks. Sophia watched the chaos unfold from Jack's penthouse office. He stood at the window, shoulders rigid, watching police cars circle the building below. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. "Porter handled all our political contributions," Jack said, his voice hollow. "If he was taking bribes, using company funds for blackmail." Sophia's laptop contained enough evidence to confirm exactly that, but she remained silent. The arrest had triggered a stock market freefall. Thompson Media Group shares plummeted by 30% in the first hour of trading. "Your PR team wants to schedule a press conference," she said carefully. "They think you should distance yourself from Porter immediately." Jack turned, his face haggard. "Would you believe me if I said I didn't know?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Sophia thought of the documents she'd photographed, the recordings she'd made. There was a paper trail leading right to Jack's office, but also evidence suggesting Porter might have been acting independently, or worse, under someone else's orders. "What did you know, Jack?" she asked softly. It wasn't the investigative reporter asking, but the woman who'd grown to care for him. He sank into his chair, suddenly looking older. "I knew we played hardball. Every media company does. But blackmail, threatening politicians, families, that's not." He ran his hands through his hair. "I built this company from nothing. My father was a janitor. Did you know that?" Sophia shook her head, moving closer. "He cleaned office buildings at night. I used to help him sometimes, emptying trash cans, learning every corner of those corporate towers. I swore I'd own one someday." He laughed bitterly. "Now look at me, the king of a corrupt castle." "Then fix it," Sophia said firmly. "If Porter acted alone, prove it. If others were involved, expose them. It's not that simple. The board, the shareholders, the other executives, they all have their own agendas. One wrong move, and everything I've built collapses." Sophia knelt beside his chair, taking his hand, then let it collapse. "Build something better from the ruins." Jack stared at their intertwined fingers. "Why do you believe in me? You've seen the worst of this world. The greed, the manipulation. Why aren't you running?" "Because I'm part of it," Sophia thought. "Because every day I don't tell you the truth is another betrayal. Because I see you," she said instead. "Not the media mogul, not the billionaire, just you." Jack pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove myself, to show I belonged in this world of power and privilege. But with you," he took a shaky breath, "with you, I don't have to prove anything." The guilt crashed over Sophia like a wave. Her recorder was in her pocket, capturing every word. Her editor would kill for this vulnerable moment from the usually unshakable Jack Thompson. But as Jack held her, his breathing slowly steadying, Sophia made a decision. She reached into her pocket and switched off the recorder. Some moments deserve to remain private, even if they were built on lies. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "we'll face it together." Jack pulled back slightly, studying her face. "You mean that?" "Yes," Sophia replied. And in that moment, it wasn't a lie at all. The truth about Victoria emerged through a misfiled document. Sophia found it while organizing Jack's personal files, a task she'd volunteered for under the guise of helping him prepare for potential investigations. The paper trail was subtle, but damning. Victoria had orchestrated the entire political blackmail scheme, using Thompson Media's resources while carefully implicating Porter. Sophia stared at her laptop screen late that night, connecting the dots. Victoria had maintained access to Thompson Media's systems even after her departure, thanks to passwords provided by a compromised IT manager. She'd used this access to plant evidence pointing to Porter, while simultaneously running her own operation. Bank statements showed regular payments from offshore accounts to politicians who had suddenly become hostile to Thompson Media. Victoria's plan was elegant in its simplicity: destroy Jack's reputation, devalue his company, then swoop in for a hostile takeover. "You're working late," Sophia jumped at Jack's voice. He stood in the doorway of his home office, jacket off, tie loosened. She quickly minimized the incriminating documents on her screen. "Just reviewing some files," she said. "Jack, we need to talk about Victoria." His expression darkened. "What about her?" Sophia took a deep breath. "I think she's behind everything. Porter's arrest, the political scandals, all of it." She laid out the evidence, watching his face carefully. Jack paced as she spoke, his agitation growing with each revelation. "That's why she's been so present lately," he muttered, watching her plan unfold. "We need to confront her," Sophia said, "but carefully. She's probably got contingency plans." As if on cue, Sophia's phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Midnight, the Skyline Bar. Come alone, or certain documents reach the press." Jack read the message over her shoulder. "It's a trap, obviously, but we have to go." The Skyline Bar occupied the top floor of Victoria's corporate headquarters. She sat at a corner table, looking like a queen on her throne. A manila envelope sat before her. "I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out," Victoria said as they approached. "Though I must admit, I expected better from an investigative journalist." Sophia felt Jack stiffen beside her. Her heart stopped. "Oh, don't look so surprised, dear," Victoria continued. "Did you think I wouldn't investigate the woman trying to take my place? Sophia Miller, or should I say, Sophia Martinez, star reporter for the Daily Chronicle." Jack turned to Sophia, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "Is this true?" Sophia couldn't speak. The hurt in his eyes was unbearable. "She's been investigating you for months," Victoria said, clearly enjoying the moment. "Everything. Your business practices, your personal life, even your touching childhood story about Daddy, the janitor. All for a spectacular." "Jack, I can explain," Sophia started. "Explain what?" His voice was ice. "How you used me. How our entire relationship was a lie." Victoria slid the envelope forward. "Everything she's gathered on you. Recordings, documents, photographs. It would destroy you, but I'm willing to bury it for a price." "The company," Jack said flatly. "Smart boy. Sign over your controlling shares, and this all disappears." Sophia watched Jack reach for the envelope, her heart breaking. She'd fallen in love with him, somewhere between the lies and the truth, and now she was losing him to both. "Jack, please," she whispered. "What I found out about you, what I feel for you, it's not what you think." He wouldn't look at her. "I trusted you." 3 words. They cut deeper than any accusation. Victoria smiled triumphantly, but Sophia noticed something in her expression, a flicker of concern. She was rushing this, pushing too hard. Why? Because there was more to the story. There had to be. The following days passed in a blur of forced public appearances and private agony. Sophia knew she had to tell Jack the truth before Victoria revealed more, but each time she tried, the words stuck in her throat. She watched him at charity events, board meetings, and press conferences, noticing how he'd aged months in just days. During a private dinner at his penthouse, Sophia rehearsed her confession in her head for the 100th time. The city lights sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating an intimate atmosphere that only intensified her guilt. "I need to tell you something," she began, but Jack spoke at the same time. "I'm thinking of stepping down." Sophia froze. "What?" From Thompson Media. He pushed his barely touched food around his plate. "The board is splitting into factions. Victoria's allies are gaining support. Maybe it's time to let go." "You can't be serious. This company is your life, is it?" He looked up, his eyes tired but clear. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building something better from the ruins. Maybe this is the chance." Sophia's planned confession died in her throat as Jack stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below them like a carpet of stars. "I've spent my entire life chasing power," he continued, "building walls, wearing masks, trusting no one. Then you came along." He turned to face her. "You showed me there's more to life than corporate battles and media empires." "Jack, please." Sophia's voice cracked. He crossed the room and knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I know this started as an arrangement, a business deal, but it's become something else, hasn't it?" Sophia's heart pounded. Everything in her screamed to tell him the truth now, before he went any further. But he was already reaching into his jacket pocket. "I had this made weeks ago," he said, producing a small, velvet box. "I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment." The ring inside was stunning but understated. A single diamond in a classic setting. Nothing flashy or ostentatious. Nothing like what the old Jack would have chosen. "This isn't about publicity or image anymore," he said softly. "This is real. You've made me want to be better, to do better. Marry me, Sophia. Not for the cameras or the press, just for us." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Jack brushed them away gently, misreading their cause. "I know it's sudden," he said, And with everything happening with Victoria and the company, "Stop," Sophia whispered. She had to tell him. Right now, before this went any further. Before she hurt him even more. But as she looked into his eyes, seeing real love therefore, perhaps the first time, her courage failed. Just a little longer, she told herself, just until she could find a way to expose Victoria's scheme without destroying Jack in the process. "It's perfect," she said, instead, hating herself, even as Jack slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. The ring felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Tomorrow, she promised herself, tomorrow she would tell him everything. But tonight, just for tonight, she would let herself believe in the fantasy that she was simply a woman in love with a man, not a journalist, destroying the person she'd grown to care about most in the world. The press conference room at Thomson Media headquarters hummed with anticipation. Sophia stood at the podium, ostensibly to announce a new charitable initiative, her first major appearance as Jack's. Her prepared speech sat before her, but in her bag was a different document, her complete investigation findings. Cameras flashed as she adjusted the microphone. In the front row, her editor from the Daily Chronicle watched expectantly. They'd been pressing for the story for weeks. The engagement announcement had bought her some time, but now they wanted results. Jack sat in the front row, smiling encouragingly. He had no idea that his world was about to implode. The evidence in her bag could destroy him. Recordings of questionable board meetings, documents linking Thomson Media to political corruption, and proof of corporate espionage. But it would also expose Victoria's deeper involvement and her attempted takeover. "Thank you all for coming," Sophia began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Today marks an important moment for Thomson Media Group." She caught movement at the back of the room, Victoria slipping in, a predatory smile on her face. Their eyes met, and Sophia knew Victoria expected her to crumble under pressure. "When I first met Jack Thomson," Sophia continued, deviating from her prepared speech, "I thought I knew exactly who he was. The ruthless media mogul, the billionaire playboy, the man who'd do anything for power." Jack's smile faltered slightly, confusion crossing his face. "The truth is more complicated." Sophia's fingers brushed against her bag, feeling the damning documents inside. In this world of corporate power plays and media manipulation, it's easy to lose sight of what's real. Victoria moved closer, her expression darkening. Sophia could expose everything right now. One word, and the truth would explode across every news outlet in the country. But then Jack stood up, misinterpreting her hesitation as nervousness about public speaking. "You're doing great," he mouthed, giving her a subtle thumbs up. The gesture, so uncharacteristically dorky for a man of his position, made her heart clench. This was the real Jack, the one who helped her practice using the right fork at dinner, who listened to her ideas about community outreach, who looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world. Before she could continue, Victoria strode to the podium. "If I may interrupt," she announced, her voice carrying through the room. "I think the press would be more interested in hearing about Ms. Miller's true identity." The room went silent. Jack's encouraging smile vanished. "After all," Victoria continued, "it's not every day that a supposed cleaning woman turns out to be an undercover reporter. Isn't that right, Ms. Martinez?" Camera flashes exploded. Reporters jumped to their feet, questions flying. Sophia gripped the podium, watching Jack's face transform from confusion to dawning horror. But before Victoria could continue her expose, Jack did something unexpected. He walked to the podium, placed himself between Sophia and Victoria, and took the microphone. "Yes, Sophia Martinez is a reporter," he said clearly, shocking everyone into silence. "And if she has found evidence of wrongdoing at Thomson Media, I encourage her to share it. Transparency should be our highest priority." Victoria's triumphant smile froze. This wasn't part of her script. In fact, Jack continued, though Sophia could see the pain in his eyes. I welcome any investigation into our practices, starting with an internal audit of all executive communications, including those from former employees. Victoria paled slightly. Jack wasn't looking at Sophia, but he was defending her right to speak the truth, even if that truth might destroy him. In that moment, Sophia made her decision, but before she could act, Victoria snatched the microphone. "How touching," she sneered. "The corrupt CEO and his investigative journalist lover. I'm sure the board will be thrilled to learn about this romantic collaboration." The room re-erupted in chaos, and amid the flashbulbs and shouted questions, Sophia realized the story had spun completely out of control. In the aftermath of the press conference, Jack and Sophia retreated to his private office. The silence between them was deafening until Jack finally spoke. "Show me everything you have," he said quietly. "All of it." Sophia connected her laptop to his office screen, displaying months of investigation. Documents, recordings, and photographs appeared one after another. But instead of the defensive anger she expected, Jack studied each piece of evidence with growing determination. "Victoria's involvement runs deeper than we thought," he said, pointing to a series of encrypted emails. "These transfers, they're not just about corporate takeover. She's been selling classified information to foreign media companies." Sophia pulled up another document. The political blackmail wasn't just about controlling votes. She was building a network of compromised officials. But why? Because Thomson Media isn't the real target. Jack's fingers flew across his keyboard, accessing restricted servers. "We're just the first step. Victoria's working with a consortium of foreign investors. They're trying to control multiple Western media outlets." As they worked through the night, the scope of the conspiracy unfolded. Victoria had orchestrated a complex web of corruption that extended far beyond Thomson Media. The evidence Sophia had gathered was just the tip of the iceberg. "We need to move carefully," Jack warned. "These people, they're not just business people, they're dangerous." A text message lit up Sophia's phone. "Midnight. The old printing facility. Bring everything you have. Come alone." "Vault, it's a trap," Jack said immediately. "Obviously, but it's also an opportunity." Sophia was already formulating a plan. "The facility's security cameras are still connected to your network, right?" Jack nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "We could record everything, but it's too dangerous. These people have already killed to keep this quiet. That's exactly why we have to do this. It's not just about saving your company anymore. It's about stopping something much worse." They spent hours preparing. Jack insisted on having a private security team on standby, while Sophia worked with her editor to prepare a secure server for the evidence. One wrong move, and they'd lose everything, or worse. The old printing facility loomed dark and abandoned at the edge of the city. Sophia entered alone, her heels echoing on the concrete floor. Hidden cameras tracked her movement, feeding directly to where Jack waited with the security team. Victoria emerged from the shadows. Flanked by two men Sophia recognized from the confidential documents, executives from foreign media conglomerates. "I have to admit," Victoria said, "you've played this game well. From cleaning lady to corporate spy, to Jack's loving quite the performance. No more games, Victoria. I know about the consortium, the foreign investments, everything." Victoria's smile turned predatory. "Then you know how this ends. What's your price? You think you can buy me? Everyone has a price. Jack taught me that." Victoria gestured, and one of the men stepped forward with a briefcase. $10 million. "Walk away. Publish whatever story you want about Thomson Media, but leave out any mention of foreign investment." Sophia pretended to consider it, giving the hidden cameras time to capture everything. "And if I refuse?" The second man moved forward, his coat bulging suspiciously. "Then we moved to less pleasant negotiations." Suddenly, the facility's lights blazed on. Security teams swarmed in from every entrance. Victoria's accomplices reached for weapons, but found themselves surrounded. "Actually," Sophia said calmly, "I think we're done negotiating." But as handcuffs clicked into place, She noticed Victoria smiling. The woman wasn't surprised. She was ready. "Oh, honey," Victoria purred. "You really think this is over? I still have one card left to play, and it's going to break Jack's heart all over again." The revelation came with the morning papers. Not about Victoria's conspiracy, but about Sophia. Someone had leaked her initial pitch to the Daily Chronicle, her detailed plan to infiltrate Thompson Media by any means necessary, including seducing Jack if required. Jack stood in his office, the newspaper crumpled in his fist. Sophia stood before him, her heart breaking at the betrayal in his eyes. "Target's known weakness for younger women can be exploited," he read, his voice deadly quiet. "Previous relationships suggest he's attracted to those who appear vulnerable. Was that your research speaking, or Victoria's helpful insights?" "Jack, please, we'll establish contact by appearing as cleaning staff. Thompson's working-class background makes him susceptible to rags to riches narratives." He threw the paper aside. "You didn't just investigate me, you studied me, like a mark." "It's not that simple," Sophia pleaded. "Yes, that's how it started, but everything changed. When you realized I could help you expose Victoria, or when you saw how willing I was to trust you." His laugh was bitter. "I proposed to you. I was ready to give up everything I built, because you made me believe in something better." Sophia stepped forward, but Jack recoiled. Just don't. "The story was never published," she said desperately. "I couldn't do it, because somewhere between the lies and the truth, I fell in love with you. How convenient." He turned to the window, shoulders rigid. "Get out, Jack, get out." Sophia fled the office, tears blinding her. She barely made it to her car before breaking down completely. Through her sobs, she didn't notice the black van approaching until it was too late. The attack was quick and professional. A hand over her mouth, a sharp prick in her neck, then darkness. She awoke in what appeared to be a warehouse office, zip-tied to a chair. Victoria sat across from her, perfectly manicured as always. "Consciousness at last," Victoria said pleasantly. "We have about an hour before the police trace your phone here. Plenty of time for a chat." "They'll find your offshore accounts," Sophia said, fighting the grogginess. "The evidence will be dismissed when they learn how you obtained it. Breaking and entering, illegal surveillance, corporate espionage." Victoria smiled. Amazing how quickly evidence becomes inadmissible when the investigator's methods are exposed. A phone rang, Victoria's private line. Her smile widened as she answered on speaker. "Jackie, darling, I assume you've seen the papers. Where is she?" Jack's voice was ice. "Safe, for now. Though that could change, depending on what you do next. If you hurt her, you'll what? Call the police. Let them investigate how your journalist girlfriend obtained all that evidence. Face it, Jack. It's over. Sign over the company." And she walks away. "Refuse." Victoria produced a syringe filled with clear liquid. "Well, accidents happen." There was a long pause on the line. Sophia held her breath, praying Jack wouldn't sacrifice everything for her. "You have 1 hour to decide," Victoria continued. "And Jack, don't do anything stupid. I'd hate to test how well Ms. Martinez handles cardiac arrest." She hung up, turning to Sophia with mock sympathy. "He really did love you, you know. That's what made you such a perfect weapon." Sophia tested her restraints, mind racing. She had to find a way out, had to stop Jack from giving up everything to save her. Because Victoria was right about one thing, Jack did love her, and that made him dangerous to everyone involved. The warehouse door burst open exactly 47 minutes later. Jack walked in alone, carrying a briefcase, apparently following Victoria's instructions. But Sophia noticed something different about him. The defeated look from his office was gone, replaced by cold determination. "The transfer documents," he said, placing the briefcase on the table. "Everything you wanted." Victoria's smile was triumphant as she reached for the briefcase. "I knew you'd make the right choice." "Actually," Jack said quietly, "I made that choice 3 hours ago." The warehouse erupted with activity. FBI agents swarmed in from every entrance. Victoria lunged for her purse, but an agent already had her covered. Victoria Chen, the lead agent, announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, and attempted murder." As agents cut Sophia free, Jack explained, "When you disappeared, I contacted the FBI. Turns out they've been building a case against Victoria's foreign consortium for months. They just needed someone on the inside to connect all the pieces." Victoria laughed maniacally as agents cuffed her. "You think this changes anything? The evidence is still tainted. Your precious Sophia is still a fraud who seduced you for a story." About that, Jack pulled out his phone, playing a recording. It was Victoria's voice, from weeks ago, outlining the entire conspiracy to her foreign partners. "While Sophia was investigating me, I was investigating you. Every meeting, every call, every transfer, I tracked it all. I just needed you to make one final mistake. By kidnapping me," Sophia realized, "you knew she couldn't resist using me as leverage." "The one piece of the puzzle the FBI needed," Jack confirmed. "Direct evidence of coercion and attempted murder." Victoria's composed facade finally cracked. "You son of a, choose your next words carefully," Jack interrupted. "They might be your last as a free woman." As the FBI led Victoria away, Sophia turned to Jack. "You risked everything on this plan. What if you'd been wrong?" "I wasn't risking everything," he said softly. "Everything was already lost the moment I read that newspaper." The pain in his voice cut through her. "Jack, what I wrote in that pitch, it was before I knew you, before I understood who you really are." "And who am I, Sophia? The ruthless CEO, the vulnerable Mark, the vengeful ex. You're the man who taught me that truth isn't just about exposing secrets," she said. "It's about what we choose to do with those secrets once they're exposed." Jack was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "I'm stepping down as CEO." "What?" "But we just saved the company to build something better," he reminded her. "No more manipulation, no more power plays. I'm turning Thompson Media into a public trust, with an independent board focused on ethical journalism." Sophia stared at him in amazement. "You're really doing it?" "Everything we talked about. We made quite a team," he said, a hint of sadness in his smile. "Even if it started as a lie, it didn't end as one," Sophia whispered. Jack looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw what he'd been missing. Beyond the deception and pain, beyond the betrayal and redemption, there was something real, something true. "No," he agreed softly, reaching for her hand. "It didn't." 6 months later, Thompson Media emerged transformed. Jack's new public trust model became a blueprint for ethical media operations. Sophia's of Victoria's consortium won a Pulitzer, and in a small ceremony, witnessed only by close friends, a former CEO and an investigative journalist proved that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones that write themselves.